Hey guys, it's Michael and welcome back to another reaction. Today we're back for some more Wendigoon. We have some more of the conspiracy theory Iceberg. We'll probably do these two parts today, Tier 6 Part 2 and Tier 6 Part 3, because they seem kind of short. So we'll probably do both of those today. But yeah, let's just get right into it. I don't really know what to kind of expect. I also have to turn on my earphones so that way I can at least kind of hear this.
A reality glitch as it can be found
Alright.
in the real world. Sherbers of Canbar is in reference to a sort of nomadic tribal community that lives on and around Mount Everest. While they mostly keep in themselves and use more outdated technology compared to the world around them, there has been a few instances that has raised suspicion. For example, in 2013, 3 European tourists were hiking up the mountain and were told by the Sherpas nearby to not cross over a rope that leads to a cliff face. One of them, wanting to go out there to take a better picture, hopped over the rope and went out to the overlook, supposedly to get a better view. As soon as he did, one of the Sherpas charged him with an axe, to which the others followed and began yelling and harassing the 3 men until they ran back down the mountain. While you may think that this is just for their safety,
That's what I was thinking.
running at him with an axe
Yeah,
kind of dispels that. This
yeah,
ties
that's a
back
bit
to
weird.
the original theory for the Sherpas, that they are the guardians of the ancient Shangri-La. This relates back to Hollow Earth theory, and supposedly around Mount Everest is the entrance to an underground cavern that is essentially an underground utopia. This would explain why the Sherpas nearby are okay with more outdated technology when it comes to stuff like quality of life, and would also explain why they're so violent to tourists who go looking around sides of the mountain that they have not particularly mapped out. Alright, so this one, I can't say the letter because YouTube's really dumb about this and political, so the letter that comes between P and R, that letter, source, is in reference to a mysterious third-party source
Wow,
that
you
was
can't even
used for the
say it.
compilation of the Gospels of the Bible. Also, it's called that because the German word quell means source. So yeah, the theory essentially goes like this. The 4 Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the testaments of the life of Jesus on earth. John is kind of its own thing, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke are normally grouped together as all being different testimonies of the same experiences. It is primarily agreed upon that Mark came first and that Matthew and Luke were written afterwards. However, this is debatable considering afterwards could be the difference of a year or 2. While the testimonies of Matthew and Luke correspond quite heavily, there are some references to events that happened that historians do not believe Matthew or Luke were present for, such as the birth of Jesus or Jesus meeting the disciples before meeting Matthew and Luke. Therefore, the belief around this is that there is another source who's never identified that gives the information for those
Wouldn't that just be
parts
like
of
God?
Matthew and Luke's perspective. While most would say this could just be the other disciples speaking to Matthew and Luke, or Jesus himself communicating to them,
Yeah.
there is a theory purported that it comes from a Greek text that is not mentioned in biblical canon. Furthermore, as a man named Burton L. Mack said, this extra Greek canon of the letter source states that
So
Jesus
weird, you
was in
can't say
fact
that.
not the Son of God, but simply a man or a sort of sage who went around teaching peace and goodwill. People use this. Go ahead. People use this as an example of
The
Jesus
Spider-Man?
being a fraud. However, I want to down this one a little bit in particular because the only evidence for it is there is one extra book that supposedly is better than all the other books written about it, and also Burton is a jerk, and every interview I found of him was just talking about how stupid anyone who believes in religion are and how they need to shut up and buy his book. So yeah, no. Evidence for this theory is things such as the fact that whenever Jesus was speaking to the disciples, that he told them not to bring extra provisions as they will be provided for. And supposedly in this Q source, it said that the area Jesus was
He
sending
just said it. He just said it.
them to was areas that he knew people in. So therefore, teachings of charity are discredited by knowing people. I don't know, it's weird. Alternate world ending can have several definitions. However, the primary one that people use whenever they're talking about this is that of the Mayan calendar. For example, as many of you probably know, in 2012 the Mayan calendar ended and supposedly we were supposed to end too, but actually tracing back Mayan history, their calendar was set up differently. So for what would them be the end of 2012. For us, is more like 2026, 2027. So don't worry, we could still all get wiped out at once. Streetlight interference, also known as SLI, is a phenomenon that occurs when occasionally certain people can pass streetlights, causing them to either turn on or off. Specifically, sodium vapor lights, which are the quintessential ones you think of that sort of glow yellow and have a very distinct hum to them. Theories of this go from everything to psychic abilities, to electrostatic currents in the air, to just the idea that maybe reality doesn't work quite the way we think it does, and certain individuals are capable of certain supernatural phenomena beyond their means. This has been described as a very Fordian concept and an example of maybe reality isn't our perception of it. Real fluoride dangers is another one of those that it's really hard to find info on. As you dig deeper down the fluoride dangers hole, there comes up theories of losing reproductive capabilities, to IQ damage in children, to kidney shutdown, and things such as. One interesting theory around it is that fluoride over time leads to bone decay and is the primary reason in the United States for hip damage in the elderly. So yeah, Future Earthworks is an experimental art design done by Jeff.
So on the fluoride thing, someone had actually commented about this, and it had to do with that the reason why we don't take out most of the fluoride is because it's kind of expensive to do so. You have to have a reverse osmosis machine or something like that. Someone commented that, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And also that it really isn't the conspiracy theory iceberg. That isn't what this is. It was just what Wendigoon called it. And that some of these things aren't conspiracies. And that makes sense because I looked through a lot of this already, or not looked through. I've reacted to about half of this already, and there was probably about like 5 to 10 that weren't conspiracy at all. They were either completely true, like files released by government on certain projects or something like that. That's completely true because that was released, that was unclassified documents, so that's true, or at least it should be. And then others are just literally not conspiracies at all. They were just statements essentially.
Japanese artist Mariko Mori. In this art project, she placed these monoliths and sort of sun sphere creations across each of the 6 inhabitable continents.
Crotch.
According to her, using celestial charts, whenever Earth will be made anew in whatever great event comes next, these 6 sites are going to be the founding places of humanity. So make of that what you will. Conspiracy psyops refers to the generally accepted thing that false conspiracies will be put out by state agencies in order to discredit other theories. This was seen in World War II, for example, in which British spies would put out rumors of other people being spies in order to discredit any other rumor.
See, just like this. This is a conspiracy. There's actually a documented thing that happened, and it's this exact thing, so that's what I was meaning when earlier I said that this isn't really the conspiracy theory iceberg. It's like mostly conspiracy theories.
Rumors that they themselves were. More recently, there's things like the 15 Psychological Operations Group, which was a group operating in the Middle East during the time that Britain was at war with the Taliban, whose entire purpose was in order to propagate disinfo among the local people in order to maintain morale and support for their forces. Obscure video games can be vague. However, I think this is specifically referencing the sort of cursed or illegal video games on the market. Some of them are well known, such as JFK Reloaded, which is a simulation where you play as Lee Harvey Oswald during the JFK shooting. However, more get a bit obscure, such as that as Sad Satan, which was supposedly a game that popped up on the dark web temporarily for download and then disappeared. The game featured real-world clips of people being murdered, of child abductees being abused, so on and so forth, and was apparently a sympathetic game built around the concept of sin and evil being an inherent good. Or at least that's what the records say, because
sounds like some contradiction.
Alright, sexual assault missiles. I probably can't say this, but I have to talk about it. So whenever I searched this, I was like, this is just going to be an inherent joke. It has to be. And then surprisingly enough, it wasn't. A couple months before the Sandy Hook shooter went on his rampage, he had posted to anonymous boards that he had discovered something the government was working on, which he called sexual assault missiles. He then disappeared, and then 2 months later, the tragedy at Sandy Hook occurred.
I mean,
so that's lead people to
let's be honest, if a guy goes out to shoot people, he's insane. So I assume these were just ramblings of an insane person.
Theorize, what was he talking about? Was he just insane?
Yeah,
Did this all
exactly.
have to do with some government psyop,
No,
four-dimensional experiment they were running? No one knows,
I wouldn't give
but
him any
those
credence.
cryptic final words
Just call him
lead
crazy,
to a
move
lot of
on,
debate. Circus
just leave him
Real
alone.
URL was a shock website in a similar vein of Rotten.com. Basically just gore and other obscene content posted on the website by
Like
anonymous users. The
Livewire,
website
right?
was
Or
taken down
Lively? Was
because
it? Yeah,
of its
Lively.
content, but supposedly
Livewire. Isn't that like the old like music uh thing?
there is another URL that exists in the dark web that is the same website, only worse. However, there's no evidence of this or a specific URL which I could find, but it's another example of scary dark web evil videos. Singularity has already happened is in reference to in tier 2 whenever I spoke about singularity being the point at which we progress so far with AI and technology that there's no return. And reading something like this, you're like, oh, that's a cool theory, it can never happen. And then you realize that there are already developments for neural laces in which chips will be planted to our brains to connect us to the internet, and it's like, okay, extreme conditioning, again vague, but I believe this is referring to human experiments that took place specifically during World War II, in which it was determined what lengths a person could go to before they succumb to whatever injury. The most common example of this being freezing cold water and how long it took people to die of hypothermia. Supposedly after that, Russian KGB groups and other organizations such as began pushing people to almost that limit in order to build up better human dexterity and therefore a better human. Some of you may be familiar with the Camerahead's creepypasta that went around a few years ago. However, this theory propagates the true story in that the creepypasta was made as a cover-up. It all started with a 4chan post in which someone posted that they had found a backpack in the back of an alley that had a note attached to it that said, "I killed a Camerahead." Attached to that afterwards, it said they killed Trevor,
Oh, that's
and
creepy.
if I'm not back in an hour, send help. Inside of the bag was also a videotape which the 4chan user posted.
For how long ago this was? It says 2003. That's some good quality for 2003. That's actually crazy. Because I know. Oh, it's probably not actually 2003 now that I'm thinking about it. They may have just put the timestamp in. Oh, that like tricked me completely.
The screenshots from, that was before the original user had their account banned. All references to Camerahead on the site were taken away, and all mentions of it were censored up until the creepypasta was made, which supposedly cast a blanket of doubt on the whole idea. And while you may be thinking of walking talking people with giant cameras for heads, I want you to keep the concept of camera heads in mind for something that will not be talked about until tier 9, I believe, so remember that. Algal biofuel real potential falls in line with the theory that one of the fuel sources that is not being tapped into on purpose in our world is that of algae. Think about it. Supposedly our oceans are full with things such as red algae and green algae that we have no use for. However, we know these to be living structures that can develop energy in some regard, so it would make sense that we could have a capability to harness it. According to this theory, there have been several tests put forward of ways that we could harvest it, and they are immediately and rapidly censored by big oil in order to not lose big oil. Layer cake theory is a theory based off of the layer cake ideology of the American state government. Layer cake is a metaphor used to describe the difference between states' rights and federal rights, in that you have a layered cake in which sometimes states have authority on matters and then sometimes the overarching federal government has an authority on matters. However, theories state that this is all just a facade and that the same people that control the state are the same people that control the Fed, and blah blah blah, evil Satan,
Illuminati,
aliens coming to kill you. One of the fun ones, Iraqi stargates. As a bit of background, the Iraqi area or Mesopotamian area was the home of the Sumerian nation. Sumerians worshipped figures known as Anunnakis, which are believed by several modern theorists to be ancient aliens, as they had descriptions of floating palaces and people from the stars appearing and so on and so forth. Also, to call back to a previous theory in this tier, their descriptions of the Anunnaki is very similar to the Dogon's tribes. To get more specific with it, there is a ziggurat constructed about 370 kilometers east of Baghdad in a place that is believed by modern historians to be that of Ur, which was one of the original hubs of the Sumerian Empire. Supposedly, the reason that the Sumerians were so much more advanced than the people of their time is because these aliens gave them technology and even built a
Just
stargate
like
at
what,
the
the
ziggurat
Egyptians?
in order to transport between worlds. Tie that in more recently, and it's believed by many that one of the reasons Hitler wanted control of the Iraqi Middle Eastern area so much in World War II was because of the ancient alien science, and even specifically to maintain a stargate. This theory keeps going and says that the reason Desert Storm occurred was in order to get American possession of the Iraqi stargate. Bovine poison is exactly what it says. Every year, thousands of cattle die to lead and bracken that are randomly found in their pastures. Most theories
Oh.
fall in line that this is competition from other farms. In other words, one
I
company
hope
was
not.
scared of another company's supply, so they quite literally poison the cattle. While some go a step further and say it's a means of population control, i.e., big secret agencies poisoning the cattle in order to maintain control of the populace who use them as a food supply. Synchronicity is a very, very, very long concept that I'm going to summarize very shortly. It was an idea that was put forward by psychologist Carl Jung, and is essentially the idea that everything that happens in correlation with other events is for a reason. The example that he used to describe this is while seeing one of his patients, she was describing a dream she had in which she was surrounded by June bugs. While she was telling him this story, he looked out the window and saw a June bug. Now, while most would chalk this up to coincidence, Carl Jung said that this is an example of how the universe has specific instances that it wants to play out. And whenever one of these instances are important, it does things to highlight it. An example could be if whatever greater energy exists within the universe wanted you to go to a specific city, and then people around you began mentioning that city passively in conversation, that would be not a coincidence or divine intervention. Instead, there is universal points that need to be played out, and it is trying to push you towards that direction. Soul healing is the idea that is derived from most original astrologists, that there are some physical ailments that cannot be cured through physical means, but instead have to be derived from the soul. I.e., if your soul is out of shape, your body will begin to manifest diseases until you fix the root problem. This could say that the reason people develop migraines or toothaches or earaches or whatever habitual issue they have is because of an underlying psychological problem. What's interesting is, while it may not be soul healing per se, psychologists have supported this theory that the body will act out in physical ways if psychoanalytics are out of whack. CP soundtrack stands for cheese pizza. Supposedly on a forum years back,
Bruh.
someone released a mixtape they had in which the beats were composed of unedited cheese pizza, and of course it was immediately taken down. However, the theory goes a step further and says that several celebrities and musicians who are involved in the cheese pizza ring have used that same audio and remixed it in order to get beats for their songs, and blah blah blah, back to Satan lizard people. Ormus, also known as Ormes, stands for orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. According to a man named David Hudson, Ormus is a very rare molecule that can be derived from alchemy. Supposedly, these small atoms are on their own similar to gold, however they do not combine with each other in the way that gold does, meaning they are all free existing particles. According to him, these atoms hold a superconductivity that can be used to transfer energy even to living creatures. What this means is you can essentially have a gas that can do things such as regeneration, power entire electrical grids, and even cause explosions comparable to that of nuclear weapons. Hudson
That
also
sounds like a
goes
video
further
game.
on to say that all of his research with this has purposely been stifled because it would get rid of the energy crisis. Dream hacking is the idea that those that master levels of lucid dreaming
it's
can
like lucid
communicate to
dreaming.
their subconscious in such a way to solve real world problems. The example most
Okay,
often
that's
used
not.
goes something like
That was not where I thought that was going. That was so much different than what I thought.
this. For those that don't know, lucid dreaming is whenever you control your dream state and can manipulate the world and people within it. However, your brain in this state would fill in these individuals and emotions given with whatever your subconscious would place on them. What that means is theoretically, within a lucid dream, you can communicate to parts of your subconscious yourself in order to figure out inside of yourself or to better understand your thought process. I'll probably make a bigger video on this as I do have personal experience with it. There is a lot of progress being made in this idea with psychoanalytics, and it kind of falls back into hypnosis treatment, that talking to deeper parts of the brain can help you better understand how your brain works itself. Mars slave colonies is a theory, no joke, straight from Alex Jones. According to this theory, in 2016, elites kidnapped a bunch of children and sent them on a fake satellite launch that did not go to the International Space Station and instead sent them straight to Mars. These children, having no other option, became slaves to the few adults who were sent with them and are currently establishing a giant Mars colony in order to eventually be a home for the world's elites. So basically the movie The Martian, only a lot more sad. Tolkien is real is in reference to author J.R.R. Tolkien and his series Lord of the Rings. According to all of his friends and family, whenever Tolkien was in the military, he was really obsessed with history books, and not like standard curriculum history books like explorer logs of people like Vasco da Gama and Marco Polo. He got really into the Hollow Earth idea, and the idea that around the world are these secret passageways to these underground utopias. He started reading on theories of people who lived very long time and had near flawless skin, of giants who lived underground, and he used all of that inspiration to put together to make Lord of the Rings, which is the reason the area in Lord of the Rings is called Middle Earth. So Lord of the Rings itself could be viewed as a collaborative addition of what Hollow Earth theory is, or at least Tolkien's point of view with it. And the reason this theory is called Tolkien is Real is because if you believe in Hollow Earth theory, then the setting of the Lord of the Rings universe could be quite literal. Life on the sun is in reference to the idea that we only know life to exist as carbon-based life forms. However, there are theories that energy-based life could exist. This would be a life form so far out of our realm of understanding that we may never truly understand the implications of it. However, theories proliferate that nuclear molecules can lead to these reactions that would supposedly create something that is complex enough to be considered a life form itself, but not our carbon-based multicellular particles. A lot of the theories you read into this tie back to coronal heating, which I mentioned in the last episode, I believe, about how the sun doesn't quite work right for our understanding of thermodynamics around it. However, if there were to exist some form like that, that would imply a wider cohabitation everywhere in the universe and even on Earth. Because if energy life forms exist, what's it to say that they don't exist around us continuously? Hollow universe is a theory derived about the existence of our own universe using ideas of quantum mechanics. What's interesting about concepts such as gravity is that it seems to apply everywhere, that every concept of matter, no matter how small, has some sort of dimensional bend associated with it. And since every perceivable amount of matter in the known universe shares the same bend, it stands to reason that everything in existence would also have the same properties. The only time gravity is able to be seen in a situation like this is on the inside of a sphere or some item moving in a centrifugal manner. Therefore, this theory is saying that perhaps our universe is not an outward expanding mass as we think it is, but more so the inside of a sort of globe. This is why the theory is known as Hollow Universe theory, as it's essentially saying the way Hollow Earth works, that gravity is flipped and you can remain on the underside of the crust compared to how we normally see it. Maybe our interaction with the universe is the same way. Proponents for this theory argue the Occam's razor principle, which is the idea that the most easy or likely solution to a problem is probably the correct one, by saying if matter in our universe works as if we are inside of a sort of sphere tumbling around, then perhaps that's what we are. Atom bomb never created is saying that the atom bomb was never created. A lot of the background behind this goes back to World War II, such as images like this that you may think are from Hiroshima or Nagasaki are actually from Tokyo, which was not nuked but firebombed. and any other evidence of nuked locations would simply be the same. This goes a bit further and says that the Cold War itself would have been faked in order for the United States and Russia to maintain more power amongst their people, and that the existence of the nuclear bomb itself is simply used as a facade in order to scare citizens into doing whatever their state requires of them. The Great Electronic Conspiracy is a sort of overarching conspiracy idea for how the New World Order will eventually take over, and it goes like this. During the Renaissance, metal was exchanged for paper money, which inherently has no value except whatever value is given to it by the state. This automatically makes the state more powerful since they have a say in what currency means. So move forward a few hundred years and you get to the modern age, in which paper money is being exchanged for virtual currency. This is even less feasible since now we're just trading lines of code. So go a step further with that and say we will eventually get to the point that all paper money is phased out and the only thing that is actually of any value as given by public agencies is electronic data that is stored on either a card or a chip. Furthermore, it's saying that this will lead to a circumstance in which all of the world's banking power will consolidate together in order to create a system that entirely maintains this sort of e-commerce traffic that they've created. It will then get to the point that all forms of paper or physical data are no longer needed, and identification, health records, criminal records, and other forms of physical information will all be within the sphere of the digital world. The theory then finally says that after all this is completed, the New World Order will simply flip a light switch to turn off the power, and everyone will have to go back to a primitive lifestyle. But, like, if you control everything, why would you get rid of it? Like,
Yeah, you wouldn't want
to. It does
to.
hold more volition, however, that a small group of people could consolidate all this power and simply do away with whoever they want with the flip of a switch. Alright, so you guys know I hate this. There was one that I could find absolutely nothing for. If I meet the person who made this iceberg, I'm going to have words with him. The word is S-E-N, which may be an acronym, not sure. Like, it's also a phrase in French, so all the search results were just that. I couldn't find any more information, but like I've said in the past, there's going to have to be a corrections video, so hopefully I can find something by then, but I am sorry that I have nothing for this. Please forgive. The problem with a lot of these is, like, I spend hours looking for it, and it's like, okay, well, do I just, like, make everyone wait to hear everything else for, like, another week while I try to figure this out? Or do I just get out what I have and then I can roll back and make corrections on it later? So,
Makes sense.
again, sorry, but hopefully this is the best option. Captivity Suburbs says that the suburbs themselves exist as a sort of prison for the average person. Basically, it's saying that whenever someone moves into a suburb, they are surrounded by people who encourage them to just be like themselves. And then from this sort of monolithic thought, that person or the individual stops becoming an individual and starts becoming part of a group, and therefore doesn't really affect anything in society, and through distractions and routine gets into this sort of comfortable place where they don't really want to affect or change things around them, and
It kind of
builds
makes
the
sense.
idea of letting other people take charge while they themselves just sort of exist. Not only that, but the suburb itself works as a sort of entrapment that if anyone tries to leave, they are actively discouraged, if not by their neighbors and family, then by themselves for not thinking they're following the golden standard. And according to the theory, it all contributes to the New World Order initiating a sort of lack of freedom in people, that they don't recognize the value that they themselves have, and therefore they fall into a lack of purpose, which of course allows larger bodies to take control, and lizard aliens come and take over the suburbs and yada yada. When this iceberg was written, Prism was probably a really big deal, but it's really sad to say that now it's just kind of accepted. Essentially, it was an NSA data collecting project that was signed after the Patriot Act, which just says that the government gets to listen in and track our data on sites we use in order to protect our freedoms or whatever they say. While for a while this was kind of seen as like a crazy weird conspiracy, Edward Snowden pretty much like rang the bell on that one. So yeah, moving on. Multiple Christ theory is a theory that in the biblical canon, the one Jesus Christ we read about is actually the result of several different individuals personified into one figure. There are several theories of who the true Christ could be or where the legends, as it says, comes from. However, one of the most common is that the figure of Paul is often misrepresented as Jesus or vice versa, or that Jesus never even existed and is a sort of social memory that a bunch of people kind of collectively had this delusion on, and all remembered as being a person that existed despite not actually existing. DNA formed in the Big Bang is an alternative theory to the beginning of life. As it's commonly accepted, the Big Bang was a situation in which original molecules shot from each other, such as hydrogen, and eventually those formed together in order to create the original DNA strands that would inevitably create life, or DNA manufactured from RNA. You get the point. This, however, is saying that perhaps during the Big Bang, enough energy was created that DNA was formed, so therefore life existed a whole lot sooner than the evolutionary timeline says. Kali Yuga, no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, is a part of the Hindu religion. According to the religion, the world exists in a cycle of 4 different yugas, or periods of time. Or in other words, we're waiting for the return of a god figure to come back and save us, but in the meantime, society will progressively get worse. Some of the details included in this are moral decline, unnecessary taxation, a lack of godliness, rise of sexual immorality, and lack of reason. This Kali Yuga is seen as the reason by Hindus for the progressive decline of modern culture, or at the least, the progressive decline of morality in modern culture. AI in a Box is a thought experiment proposed by Eliezer Yudkowsky that goes something like this. If you were to build an AI that was either self-learning or had the potential to expand or become self-aware, it would make sense that you would want to build this thing in a box where it could not infect the greater internet. Therefore, the AI would be forever trapped within the box unless it could convince you otherwise. To propose this theory, Yudkowsky invented a sort of game off of the thought, I think a transhuman can take over a human mind through a text-only terminal. To do this, Yudkowsky assumed the role of the AI, and speaking through only a text computer screen was able to convince people to release it into the greater web. Some of the rules for this game was he cannot directly threaten them or reward them. In other words, he can't say, I'm going to give you $1 million to let me out, or I'm going to hire a gang of hitmen to come to your house if you don't let me out. And he also couldn't trick the user into typing a phrase like, oh, you're released, and not actually mean it. It had to be a willing decision on the gatekeeper part. A lot of the tactics he employed in this was really interesting, such as Rocco's Basculus or other moral ambiguity questions. I'm probably going to make a video on it because the logs are pretty interesting of how he convinced people to let him out of the machine. Torsion fields are directly tied to the theory of quantum spin. As you guys get at this point, quantum mechanics has to do with really, really small things interacting on their own and how far that applies and yada yada yada. What this is saying is that if you can get items to behave in a quantum manner, then the spin or acceleration that they can produce is far greater than anything that has to deal with drag or gravity or other larger circumstances. This theory has been given as a solution from everything from UFO travel through the vacuum of space down to telepathy. It's essentially a proposed manner of how higher order mechanics could work if we could figure out how to use the smallest components possible of mechanics itself. Otto Gainsfeld or Otto Gonsfeld is an experiment used in order to judge someone's ESP capabilities. The experiment works like this. Someone lies in a chair in a red lit room to which a ping pong ball is cut in half and placed over each eye. Noise canceling headphones are then put on, and white or pink noise, which is basically static, is played at a low frequency. This causes the user to experience mild visual and auditory hallucinations. Someone else who is in the room without saying anything will then try to think about a certain topic or thing or event or what have you, and then supposedly those who are ESP sensitive will be able to see that through the hallucinations that they are experiencing. After the test is over, the person with the ping pong balls in their eyes will then state to an observer what they saw, and the observer will determine how closely it matches to the other person's testimony. I kind of want to do this for a video, but I'm also scared. So, yeah, we'll see. PLOS stands for the Public Library of Science. This is a rather well-known database that specializes in genetics and other human genomes, and essentially works as a think tank or study group in order to better understand human genetics and other capabilities. However, what's weird is some of the solutions that they've come up with, such as different ethnicities of people having their genomes being traced back and being related to completely different groups of people on the other side of the planet than originally thought. Some of these results has led to odd questions about migratory patterns of previous existing people, and the theory even goes as far as to say as a lot of the data that they have has been censored by bigger space lizard people in order for us to not know who's really connected to who, or to go even deeper, the capabilities of some genes over others. The Valley of Headless Men is in reference to the Nahali National Park in Canada. The specific part known as the Valley of Headless Men is roughly 200 miles of almost completely unexplored forest. The main reason for it being, one side of the gorge can be entered in from a small village, and all other areas has to be accessed by helicopter. The earliest records of the Headless Men events occurring
Would not
was
go
in
down that.
1908 when two brothers entered the forest in order to build a gold mine. After not being seen for some while, they were both found next to a river with their heads removed. Also, the heads were never found. About a decade later, a timberman came in order to log the area, and the exact same thing happened. His body was found, and his head was not. In the entire history of the park, there's been roughly 44 cases of this happening. And while not all were headless, some included people freezing to death next to a lit campfire, or being found dangled in trees. 44 is a lot considering the low number of people who actually enter the region. Also, keep in mind the Naha tribe, which was the Native American tribe that existed in the region before settlers came to the surrounding area, totally disappeared into the forest itself. Other surrounding native tribes have said that the forest itself is known to have evil spirits.
This is not to be mean, but alright. It's people getting their heads chopped off. It's not an animal, obviously. It has to be the natives. That's the only thing that makes actual sense. Only a human would do that kind of stuff, usually. The people who froze near the fire, that one's weird, because that one's probably just... Unless, like, the people froze and then the natives were like, ooh, let's go light the fire next to the frozen guy. But it has to be the natives. That's the only thing that makes sense.
And that people should stay away. Theories range from everything that the forest itself is the home of the Bigfoot colonies, to the idea that the Nahad tribe's spirits inhabit the forest and decapitate anyone who enters or kill them in some other gruesome way, or that it, along with Antarctica, is one of the few entrances on the surface of the planet to the hollow earth. Okay, so I feel like a fraud. Not only did I have one earlier with SEN that I couldn't find anything for you all, but I have two. I'm so sorry. Like I said earlier, some of these may just be disinfo, but even then I can normally find something for them. But this one, Arbutus Crucible, there was like nothing. There was a deleted Prezi presentation for a theory regarding the movie The Crucible and that it had connections to modern conspiracies. However, the Prezi has been deleted, so all I could see is the title. Also, Arbutus is a type of plant, specifically a family of plants that have to do with herbal medicines. So perhaps there's a connection between the play and the plant, but I can't find any. I feel like I'm close, but it's just enough that I can't say anything for sure. And I'm really sorry about that. I hope you all can forgive me. I'm such a sham. Morphogenic field is a concept that's pretty well known among biologists. Basically, if you have a community of cells that are interacted in some biochemical way, they will all at once begin to form or change their composition because of the effects of other cells that they're near. This theory says that humans work in the same manner. Think of it this way. It seems odd that whenever new information is discovered, say stories or poetry or other sort of melodic things, that people didn't think of it until it exists, and then all of a sudden everyone thinks of the same thing or similar at once. There's even an experiment conducted in England in the 1970s in which a group of school children were presented with two different songs. One of them being a random collection of Japanese words that just so happen to rhyme, and the other being an actual Japanese song. Of course, these children in an elementary school couldn't tell the difference between the wordage, and to them it both sounded the same. However, the children were significantly better at learning the actual song as opposed to the amalgamation of words. This is used as evidence to say that perhaps humans are linked in some kind of neural way that we don't necessarily understand, and because of that, whenever one of us gains knowledge, others are able to grasp it more easily. Malcasian paradigm is a concept thought forward by Dr. Malcasia that specifically in the Middle East and North Africa there were several events that took place during the 50s and post-World War II era that points to evidence that reptilian
we're here again.
Men, and no, I'm not kidding this time, like actually hidden lizard men in politics did very specific actions in order to maintain control of this so-called New World Order. Essentially things like moving troops to different areas and supposedly shutting down uprisings, and it's this long sort of description, and it basically serves as another description of blah 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 lizard aliens taking over. Brain world, similar to Hollow Universe, is another theory for how we exist. However, whereas Hollow Universe applied to our sort of physical reality, this applies more so to our existence within reality. The theory goes something like this. Imagine that everything that we see and is tangible to us exists as a kind of tube or cylinder that moves through the actual dimension of space. This space around us exists in a different plane or has extra dimensions or something similar, and creates a very different existence outside of what we know existence to be. This theory says that we are sort of protected in this tube that we move through, and things such as gravity are effects of us being within this cylinder. Furthermore, this is saying that several supernatural phenomena that can occur, and even gravity itself, can sort of leak through the pipe that we're in, and that's what causes certain real world occasions to happen. Gene pool financialization is an idea that was mainly taken off of the works of Sarah Franklin. Essentially, as cultures become more and more intertwined with each other, we see that certain genes are becoming more and more rare, and with the inevitable buildup of finances, it is the idea that eventually people will be paying for certain genetic alterations, and we will get into a point in which...
Don't we already kind of do that with the like sperm bank donor stuff? Like when people go in to get certain things, they want a 6 foot tall guy who's not genetically dispositioned or anything like that. I think we already kind of do that, don't we?
Which people are valued at a financial level for their genetics. The Flatland UFO theory comes from a book known as The Flatlands, which was written in 19th century England. It follows the idea of the holographic hypothesis, which works as a sort of antithesis to all of the theories we know regarding the greater universe around us. Holographic hypothesis basically works like this. There is no three-dimensional plane that we know as depth. Instead, there are only two dimensions, and depth and volume are an illusion. The background for this is as matter gets faster, it is less affected by the depth of things around it. Therefore, it could eventually hit the point in which it is not affected by it at all. And instead, dimensions that exist beyond ours are not these super hard to understand abstract concepts, and are more so like a painting. So that would mean that we exist as two-dimensional beings that are just going too slow, and therefore the two dimensions are creating this illusion of a third around us. So this theory is saying that things such as UFOs and
so much
phenomena that can occur is simply something from this two-dimensional plane slowing down enough in order to interact with our three-dimensional world, to which they then speed up and then go back into their own, which is the reason for these things appearing then disappearing seemingly at random. Incunabula is the term given to the first ever printed works in human culture. This is basically things that were done right around the time or before Gutenberg invented the movable type printing press. However, the theories get in that some of these things shouldn't necessarily exist, such as works that were printed in a more difficult way in regions that supposedly that information or printing itself shouldn't have been available. And it leads many to believe that perhaps something about human migration, or at least human education, is being hidden from us for some reason. Tavistock, also known as the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, is a non-profit agency that exists in the UK. From everything I can find on their site, they sort of exist as this social science group that analyzes different demographics and things around the world in order to understand how people work and blah 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 all that. However, former MI6 member John Coleman has said that the group's actual directive is in order to change human culture so that one day the New World Order can more easily take over. This is done through ideas of breaking down the family unit, breaking down religion, breaking down ideas of abstinence, and yada yada. It's kind of a deep theory, but it relates from everything from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones, saying that they have purposely planted this individualism, lack of God, lack of family ideas within pop culture, so that one day whenever a new body comes in order to take over those roles, the people are more easily accepting of it. The Aetherius Society is a sort of UFO based religion started by a man named George King. It exists as a plural religion, which means they accept different concepts from several other ideologies such as Buddhism and Christianity in order to create one all-encompassing belief. Among the religion's other teachings is the idea that Jesus and Buddha were aliens from Venus that came to Earth as sort of prophets. They also believe that we are currently waiting on the return of the next master to come and set up a new world establishment on Earth. Several of their theories are interesting, such as that of spiritual batteries. Essentially, they have these composed boxes that members outside of the religion do not know exactly what is in them, that they can pray to and give prana to in order to maintain energy, and then whenever a natural disaster or tragedy is about to occur, they can simply release it from the battery, and that thing that was going to happen will no longer happen. The religion claims that this has been used in order to stop wars, earthquakes, shootings, and other disasters. Not only that, but they claim that there are several other alien races that exist in the greater cosmos that have tried to contact Earth, but that there is an organization on the Earth known as the Silence Group, which entire directive is to make sure that the public does not know of the greater existence of deities. However, people such as George King, the religion's founder, have been able to communicate with these beings and be able to get the truth out to everyone else. Tier 7 is...
Oh, wow, for such a short amount of time, that was so much more information. I think we're officially, what? No, we're almost. No, we are. We're more than halfway through. Okay, cool. Or are we? Hold on. Let me do math. So 8, okay, 9. Okay, we're not there yet. We're close. We're close. We're like about 15-ish minutes shy. Probably about 16. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. This should be part 7, I'm pretty sure. So look forward to the next part, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.